Hello and welcome. Today I'm very excited to take a look at one of my favorite games, Way of the Samurai. Released in 2002 and developed by Acquire and published in North America by BAM Entertainment for the PlayStation 2 console. Way of the Samurai takes place in the 1870s during the early days of the Meiji period, when Japan was moving towards a more westernized society, and samurai had lost their relevance and social status after the fall of the Tokugawa shogunate. You play a wandering ronin, named Kenji by default, although you can name him whatever you want, and customize his appearance. You enter the small town of Rokatsu Pass, and as soon as you enter the town, you begin to see drama unfolding among the townspeople. You witness a group of bandits harassing a young girl and carrying her away. From here you're given the choice to ignore them, attempt to join in, or intervene and fight them off. The whole game plays out over the course of 2 days, and as each day progresses, story events will unfold regardless of whether your character is there to witness them or not. These can range from secret meetings between faction double-crossers, one of the downtrodden townspeople going rogue and storming a faction's base on his own, with it being your choice of whether to help him or not, or simply witnessing a thug harassing an elderly man. Your character is given the freedom to join factions and betray them later, or simply act as an indifferent bystander and watch everything play out. The factions are the Meiji government, armed with more modern weaponry such as rifles and cannons, the Kuruo family, led by Teshin Kuruo, a formidable swordsman whose family holds the most influence over the town, mostly through extortion, intimidation, and being the owner of the local iron foundry. The Akadama clan, led by the young and charismatic Kicho, who, when not totally pulling off the mesh t-shirt centuries before System of a Down guitarist Darren Malakian did it, aims to drive the Meiji government out of Rokatsu Pass and foil the Kuruo family's plan to sell the iron foundry to the government. As stated previously, it takes place over 2 days, with the final day culminating in a huge battle between the local factions against the government forces. Depending on what faction, if any, your character sides with, and what choices you made during gameplay, you can get a variety of different endings. The game can be completed fairly quickly, in my experience while capturing this gameplay footage as little as 45 minutes, so repeated playthroughs are not only encouraged, they're almost required, as no single playthrough will witness every plot development nor collect every sword. And speaking of swords, this brings us to the combat. The basic moves are a standard attack, power attack, block, and a kick for trying to break an enemy's guard. Combat will typically be against a group of enemies, with major story characters acting as boss battles. The different swords have different stances and movesets, as well as their own stats which can be upgraded by Dojima, the local smith. These are sharpness, which determines attack strength, durability, which is the overall strength of your sword and how much heat, generated by attacks and blocking, it can take before breaking, as shown by an on-screen meter, and finally we have flexibility, which affects your defensive strength. Different swords can also have modifiers that affect your total amount of health points. You have a limited number of inventory slots for swords, 3 at most, and the ability to have Dojima store weapons for you and add them to your collection for your next playthrough. I find the combat to be very satisfying. Even lower tier generic enemies can be challenging, and sometimes the game will throw in elements to keep you on your toes, like having to defeat a large tank-like foe while his smaller comrade fires bullets at you that throw you off balance and do heavy damage. I'm a big fan of the block and counter system, which involves using the analog stick to push against enemy attacks when you lock swords and knock them off balance, priming you up for a counterattack. Mastering this is crucial to gameplay because enemies will use the same tactic against you as well. The only thing I'm not a huge fan of is the save system. You get one save slot, which can only be written while exiting the game, and it's promptly erased as soon as you reload the game. If you die, that's it. The game is over and you have to start from the beginning. I understand wanting to add to the challenge, but I'm not in favor of something as mundane as save slots being a gameplay mechanic. In spite of that, I still find Way of the Samurai to be a highly enjoyable experience. Dialogue is presented in text form, with the voice acting taking the form of grunts, groans, and other non-word reactions. Some players might find this polarizing, and this is fair. Some of the sounds are truly cringeworthy, but I feel like it adds to the game's distinctive aesthetic. The game's music, composed by Noriyuki Asakura, whose other credits include the Tenchu series and the theme song to Rurouni Kenshin, is enjoyable and does a great job of setting the mood for the game. Overall, I find the plot to be engaging. The game does a great job of pulling you into Rakatsu Pass's tense political situation. Relationships between factions and even individual characters are highly complex, and with the player's intervention, extremely dynamic. The player will often find themselves acting as a mediator, or an instigator if you so choose, between other characters. Whether it's catching someone having a secret love affair, convincing someone not to prematurely rush into battle on a suicide mission, or simply helping another character write a love poem to his crush. I really like how the game's narrative moves forward, even if the player isn't there to witness key plot events. Other characters will comment on them later on, and this really gives the game world a living feel. Factions that, on their surface level, may seem archetypally good or evil, may have deeper motivations behind their agenda that the players might find themselves becoming sympathetic to. The common ground between the Kuruo family and the Akadama clan is that they both seem to feel desperate and backed into a corner, having lost their high social status in a changing Japanese society. While perhaps sympathetic, both factions could be interpreted as short-sighted and flawed. Dojima, in addition to his smithing services, also acts as sort of an impartial narrator to the story. He quietly pops in at certain moments to throw out some hot takes on the current situation, in the form of monologues that are dripping with brooding energy. Just look at him. Ooh. Way of the Samurai oozes style and charm, and the high replayability factor makes you want to revisit Rakatsu Pass again and again. Unless you're following a guide or walkthrough to the letter, every game experience will be at least slightly different. When I was a kid, I had one of those plans from Blockbuster where for $20 or so you could rent games for as long as the plan allowed, or swap games out as much as you wanted. After renting it for the first time, Way of the Samurai became my go-to game when I couldn't find anything else I wanted to try out, and it never got old. Revisiting it years later as an adult, even after capturing the footage I needed for this video, I felt inclined to keep playing it, getting different endings, trying different dialogue options to see what happened, trying to collect the rarer in-game weapons. The original PS2 disc isn't terribly expensive and can be found online without much of a hassle, but for some reason, at least in my area, I don't often see it in used game stores. To my knowledge, it's not terribly rare, but I suspect that most people who do own a copy tend to hang on to it. And I can certainly understand why. If you do stumble across a copy, I absolutely recommend picking it up. In my humble opinion, it's a fantastic game that plays just as well now as it did in 2002, and it's absolutely worth your time. Thanks for watching.